Hello and welcome to Technology Connextra's Sights and Sounds, a video series on my second channel which I neglect because I am a bad person. I promise the pinball machine video will happen at some point in 2026, but today I have what I hope is a really interesting audio experience for you, where I put an audio recorder inside the engine compartment of a 2021 Toyota Sienna, which is a hybrid electric vehicle. I just released a video on my main channel titled Nobody Understands the Point of Hybrid Cars, and this was originally going to be something that I would include in that video, but the script just got kind of out of hand, so that's why we're doing this on Connextras. But it is very, very interesting, and I hope you find it as interesting as I do. So, I borrowed the Sienna from my mom and dad, and currently it is sitting in their driveway as I set the scan tool up and look for different data pins. So this video is going to start looking at just the scan tool, and once I am far away enough from their house to anonymize their location a little bit, then I will show you the actual road. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to stop showing you where I'm going to my destination in Hammond, just for the privacy of the person that I was visiting. But with that out of the way, what you are hearing right now is just the electric air conditioning compressor periodically start up, and then the van's cooling fans start up to reject the heat from the condenser. I don't really understand why this van runs the cooling fans in bursts like it does. I feel like they could just run at very low speed given the mild air conditioning requirements that are happening right now, but that's not what it's doing. But now that I have the scan tool set up, I want to point out, for this clip, I am having the scan tool show target generator torque, and I will explain why. That's actually a really interesting piece of information to see because it helps contextualize why the engine sound is changing in the way that it does. And then before I actually start moving, I'm going to explain a couple of sounds that you will hear. So you will be able to hear the electric motors, but the engine drowns them out, so just be prepared for that. So you'll hear some whirring noises as the car accelerates and slows down, but whenever the engine is running, you don't really hear that noise anymore. But you will also hear when the engine stops and the vehicle is at lower speeds, you'll be hearing this kind of ghostly whooshing hissing sound, and that is the car's pedestrian alert noise. So that is an artificial sound that it is producing so people can tell there is a vehicle that may be moving, since well, it wouldn't make any noise otherwise without the engine running, and it's a good thing to alert people that, hey, there's a car coming. So you'll often hear this kind of ghostly noise. Here's what it sounds like. And that is that pedestrian alert system. And you'll hear that come on after the engine shuts off, especially when I'm slowing down, just because it only makes that noise below certain speeds. It's not really worth dwelling on this, but I did want to explain that. But anyway, let's actually start going, and I'm going to point out some interesting stuff, and then I'm going to shut up and you can just enjoy the rest of the experience. First, I'm putting the vehicle in reverse to back out of their driveway, and you will only hear motor generator 2 pushing the car backwards, and you won't hear the pedestrian noise because this car actually has a second speaker near the rear hatch that it uses when it's in reverse. And then when I shift into drive, you will hear that pedestrian noise start up. To give you an explanation of all the things you're seeing on the graph, the red line is engine RPM, so that is how fast the engine crankshaft is spinning, and the black line is how far I'm pushing the accelerator pedal down. So those are kind of the two most important things to call out, because the black line corresponds to how much power I am requesting from the car, and the red line indicates how quickly the engine is spinning to meet that need. Now, engine rotational speed is not directly correlated to engine power, and that's important to point out, but I do have target engine power shown on there in watts. And as I said in the main channel video, 1 horsepower is 746 watts. So if you want to convert that to horsepower, just divide by 746. But another note I will explain, which may be relevant in this video, but I'm not sure how clearly it shows up in this data set. It showed up in a different data set, but I don't know which one that was. This engine's thermal efficiency starts to drop off above 3,200 RPM. So you will sometimes see the car bring the engine right to 3,200 RPM when you're requesting a lot of power, because that's as powerful as the engine can get while still operating efficiently. And once the engine exceeds 3,200 RPM, it's starting to operate less efficiently than it could. So you may see in this data engine speed go right to 3,200 RPM and then just stay there. Again, I'm not sure 100% whether that is captured anywhere in this data set, but that is something that you can kind of glean from the ways it's making decisions, in that it will limit itself from engine output so long as it has spare energy in the hybrid battery state of charge. And that is the dark green line, the true green. The target generator torque, which I will explain in a moment, is that kind of olive green color. The pure green is the hybrid battery state of charge. And as I explained in the main channel video, the car will not let that get below 45%. So if it goes below 45%, it will use the engine to recharge the battery, but otherwise it only wants to charge it using regenerative braking, which you will see happen as the blue line, vehicle speed, goes down. So when the blue line is going down, the green line will be going up slightly because it's charging the batteries. And if the green line is going down, you can tell that the car is using energy in the battery pack to assist the engine. Okay, I want to pause the video here real quick because I want to point this out. In that little burst there, notice how the hybrid battery state of charge was dropping, and then suddenly it stopped dropping and the engine speed increased even though the throttle command was not increasing at all. And in fact, I lifted off the throttle very slightly right when that happened. And this indicates at this moment, the car ran out of energy from the battery pack, or it got below some threshold depending on its programming, and it said, well, I got to increase engine speed because I'm not going to use any more energy from the battery pack than here. So right here you can see it make the decision, I'm going to stop using energy from the battery pack and I'm going to make the engine contribute more because that's the more fuel efficient thing to do in this particular moment. And so I just wanted to point that out because it is interesting. You can see these sorts of things happening where it didn't get down to 45%, but who knows how it was programmed to make each individual decision, because honestly, that's kind of the fascinating thing about hybrid drivetrains is the fact that somebody had to come up with a way to have the engine computer make all of these decisions based on contexts that it can't really fully understand. So it's really interesting, but I just wanted to pause this here because you can very clearly see in this data, the battery state of charge doesn't move very much, but you can see these stair steps, and right here they stop stepping down and the engine speed increases even though I was letting off the throttle very slightly. It's really cool. Okay, I'm going to chime in here to explain a couple things as we drive through this residential neighborhood. So obviously the car keeps coming to stops as I hit stop signs, make turns, etc., etc. And every time I stop commanding the accelerator pedal, it basically shuts off the engine. There are a couple of times where it didn't, but for the most part, if you don't have to be pushing the car forward, it will just shut off the engine. But in this graph, I am logging target generator torque. Now, I did not talk about this in the main channel video very much, but what's really interesting is you can actually hear the tone of the engine change when motor generator torque increases. And speaking of increasing, you will see that line go up positive every time the car starts the engine because it's using that generator as a motor to spin the engine crankshaft. But then once the engine has started, you will see that line go down because it has switched to using it as a generator and it is producing a negative torque. And that negative torque, because it is resisting the movement of the engine, is how the power from the engine gets transmitted into the wheels. And so if you pay close attention, you can kind of hear the tone of the engine change as the generator starts resisting its forward movement. I would almost describe it as saying you can kind of hear the engine engage mechanically with the wheels. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to the actual visuals so you can see where exactly I'm going and what the car is doing, but I will leave the graph up there on the screen. And I'm going to leave the video like this basically the rest of the way, and I honestly don't think I need to chime in very much. This is just going to be a cool thing to listen to. But I will point out the engine compartment is actually sealed up. I had to take a lot of panels off to get a shot of the underside of the actual drive unit. And so the engine compartment, you don't actually hear much wind noise or road noise. It's surprisingly isolated. So the sound recording is a pretty good example of what it sounds like in there until the vehicle's at true highway speeds and the wind noises start to really show up. But anyway, I'm just going to let this play out and you can watch it. Hopefully you find some cool information from here, which I really think there's a lot of cool things to be gleaned from how the hybrid system makes decisions and exactly what it's doing. But I will move towards eliminating the visuals once we get towards the destination, again, for the privacy of the people I'm visiting on this trip to Hammond, Indiana. So, hope you enjoy. Okay, now that we're somehow cruising along without any traffic on the Tri-State, Chicagoland's favorite tollway, well, the rest of this isn't really that interesting, so I've made the executive decision to skip ahead to the very end when I pull off the highway. And again, I'm going to be covering up the ending destination, so I'm going to drive past the speedway you saw me get a car wash in, and then I'm just going to cover it up from that point. But going through this footage, I realized one of the things I called out was happening while I was calling it out, and then there wasn't really a good example of it the rest of the time. So I want to play this clip here from the very beginning, and again, pay attention to the way the engine changes sound even when it was originally running, but target generator torque went negative. Now, I don't know for sure, but what I suspect is happening here is we are hearing the different metal parts of the planetary gear set slapping against each other a little bit as motor generator 1 starts to slow down the rotational speed of the engine, and then the engine starts transmitting power into motor generator 2. I believe that is what we are hearing here. It's actually a very similar sound to what it sounds like when the engine starts, except the engine was already running. So prior to motor generator 1 actually putting a load on the engine was more or less idling, but then when we see that generator torque number go very negative, well, suddenly now the engine is actually pushing against something, and we can hear that change, which I think is very interesting. But otherwise, that's kind of the end, so I hope you enjoy. You will notice the pedestrian sound shut off at the very end, and that is because I put the car in park, and that was the end of the drive. So I hope you enjoyed this and found it interesting.